In the year 1915, Coca-Cola faced a problem because a lot of imitators tried to bring out similar products and they need to clearly differentiate themselves. So their leader could have easily told, let's make a differentiated product. But he did not do that. He used a story. He told his marketing team, his innovation team, that we are getting inundated with imitators. So we need to innovate a Coca-Cola bottle that even in the dark, if you hold the bottle, you know that it's a distinct Coca-Cola bottle. And that's how he used story to get his message across rather than management jargon. So unless we get that element of surprise, it's difficult to get the attention of the audience. And here is where Steve Jobs did a wonderful thing in his product demo. His product demos are legendary. So he was launching the MacBook Air, the very, very thin laptop. Okay, and he could have easily told that my laptop is just 5 thick and all that, but he didn't do that. And as you rightly told, he showed and he didn't tell. And in order to show, what he did was that he just showed a manila envelope, a yellow manila envelope, okay, a very, very thin envelope. And just as a surprise, he pulled out the MacBook Air out of that manila envelope, which was almost flat. He did not have to say anything more to demonstrate the fact that the MacBook Air was so thin.
Beautiful, sir. Now, do you have any frameworks or templates that you use for storytelling? Let's go back to that Bollywood movie, Sholay, one of my favorites too. Now, when Thakur employs Jay and Viru, it doesn't happen easily, does it? There is a certain amount of persuasion that's required, whether it is to get somebody to do something, or more importantly, in a business situation where you have to persuade stakeholders and employees to do what you want them to do. How does business storytelling help you with persuasion? I'm very excited to introduce the guest for today, DTM Amitabha Saha Roy. He has held global leadership positions in the US, Europe, and Japan. He currently works as a global practice head at TCS. He works on cutting edge artificial intelligence technologies to solve complex business problems. He's a leader, innovator, and a business storyteller. He won the Tata Group's prestigious Innovista Award from Tata chairman N. Chandrasekaran and was recognized to be among the top innovators among the entire Tata Group. He won the prestigious TV AI Product of the Year at New York. He is a distinguished Toastmaster, the highest educational award at Toastmasters International. He enjoys reading, photography, and mentoring. It's a pleasure and an honor to welcome DTM Amitabh into our podcast. Welcome to Rise and Speak podcast, where beginners become bold speakers. My name is CM Manjunath. I'm your host today, and today we're going to talk all about business storytelling. Welcome, DTM Amitabh, sir. How are you?
Yeah, thank you so much, Manjuna. Thank you so much for having me. A pleasure to be at your podcast and look forward to the conversation on business storytelling. Thank you so much again.
Thank you very much for being here. Well, let's dive right in, sir. Now, you have played global leadership roles in leading technology companies. Could you start by telling us how business storytelling has helped you in your career?
Yeah, so one is that we come with a technology background, as with many of us in Bangalore. So in the world of technology, we often become very passionate about what we do. And as technologists, when we communicate to our customers, sometimes we use technical lingo. So what I've found over the years is that using technical jargon, technical lingo does not make us so effective in communicating and getting the message across with our customers, especially because they come from a business background. All they care about is solving their business problems. They don't care about whether the technology is Java, Python, or artificial intelligence. So that's when I realized that we need to adapt our communication style in a way that we can get our message across more impactfully with customers. And when I started applying business storytelling, I found a great difference And that's when I started more and more into business storytelling, and the results were very, very evident. Okay, so that's the brief background as to how I stepped into business storytelling. Apart from that, we always deal with a lot of complexity. So business storytelling simplifies complex concepts, and it can be put in a very, very simple way that people can understand. So that's another part. And third is that we deal with a lot of data, and data can become dry and boring. So unless we use techniques like data storytelling, it's difficult to get the insights across. So these are some of the ways in which business storytelling has helped me in the world of technology.
Absolutely. Yeah. Get rid of the technical jargon, just focus on the business problems, use stories to convey the solutions, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
When we think about a business, it's filled with constant change, competition, and there's always something going on, very uncertain. So, why do stories matter in the world of business? Why is it important for you to tell business stories?
Very good question, Manjuna. And all the more important because people tend to think that stories are a little frivolous, whereas businesses are serious. Because number one, nothing sticks like stories. Okay, take the example of Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, as we know, is one of the world's leading brands, and they are always known for innovation and differentiation. So, in the year 1915, Coca-Cola faced a problem because a lot of imitators tried to bring out similar products and they need to clearly differentiate themselves. So, their leader could have easily told, let's make a differentiated product. But he did not do that. He used a story. He told his marketing team, his innovation team, that we are getting inundated with imitators. So we need to innovate a Coca-Cola bottle that even in the dark, if you hold the bottle, you know that it's a distinct Coca-Cola bottle. And that's how he used story to get his message across rather than management jargon. So that is number one. Number two is that stories build that emotional connection. While data, facts, figures, logics are extremely important, but when it comes to problem, unless you're using emotions, it's difficult to really connect your message with the customer. I'll give another example of Airbnb. Airbnb, as we all know, is an alternate to hotels and one of the most successful aggregators in terms of accommodation. So, Airbnb, see, one of their key things is that when we travel, they want us to make feel at home, although we are away from home. So, now if they just told that, that would be like an advertising slogan. But on the other hand, what they do is that they use stories very effectively and they used a real life incident, an incident of one of their customers who went to Japan. So one of their customers who went from US to Japan, a faraway land, lived in an Airbnb place. And when he was there, along with the family that lived in that place in Japan, that family there was so good. Japan is a new place. So Japan is known for its bullet trains, its very fast trains, very different kind of food, very different kind of culture. So the Japanese host made that Airbnb customer, so comfortable. He gave the maps to him how he could commute in the city. He gave tips in terms of how to use chopsticks to eat the noodles. Okay, he gave a lot of tips which helped his stay in Japan to be extremely comfortable. And by the time that Airbnb customer finished the Japan, he felt so obliged that he told the Airbnb host that I came in as a stranger to your country, but as I'm leaving now, I feel like your family. Okay, so that was a story that really drove home the fact that Airbnb really makes you feel comfortable, although you're away from home. So that is number two. And number three is that in business, it's very important to drive trust and credibility. Customers have to trust you. Customers have to find you as a credible partner. Okay, and just speaking jargon, just speaking concepts are not going to cut it. So here is another example of how Amazon is known for really being extremely frugal, really being I mean, you can find the best prices on Amazon. We all go to Amazon and always validate the prices when we try to buy something. Okay, so now in order to demonstrate how Amazon is so frugal, how Amazon passes on all the benefits to the consumers, in the early days of Amazon, when Jeff Bezos started the company, he wanted to drive this culture of frugality to all his employees. As a CEO, he had enormous power. He could have easily told all of you don't fly business class, you always have to fly economy. Okay, so he could always say his employees don't live in luxury hotels, live in economy hotels. But he did not do that. He actually demonstrated it. What he did is that in order to set up his office, rather than buy new furniture, he went to a Home Depot store. He bought some cheap doors there, because that you get at a very, very low cost. He brought those doors to his office and then just used a hammer and a nail and put a few sticks under that door and made them into tables. So they were makeshift tables using very, very cheap doors. Okay, so he led by example, and through a story, he communicated his message that we need to be frugal as a company because we need to pass on the benefits to end consumers. And that's how he was far more credible as opposed to using his authority as a CEO and asking or forcing his employees to be more economical. So these are the ways in which really stories can cut it in the business world, and stories really make an impact when you use them with your customers, with your employees, with your stakeholders.
It's amazing how you answer this question with a few stories. And that's the importance of show, don't tell, they say. You did a great job. Same with Mr. Bezos when he actually bought the door, turned it into a table. He showed, just didn't tell.
Absolutely.
Beautifully, beautifully demonstrated that. And also, I read your story about the Coca-Cola thing. It was a wonderful idea and innovative at the same time. As a storyteller in business, that can make a huge impact in your audience. What are the elements of a good story that you focus on? That as an audience, if I'm going to be a better speaker, I should focus on the elements of a good story, and also stories that stick, more importantly, that will be remembered for a very long time.
Absolutely. All of us love to have our stories stick and people remember it long after they're told. So here are a few things that I've found very, very effective in terms of making the story stick. One is that it always helps if we have an element of surprise in the story. That's because our mind acts like a prediction machine. We are all the time trying to predict what will happen next. And the moment we know what is going to happen next, we switch off our mind. So unless we get that element of surprise, it's difficult to get the attention of the audience. And here is where Steve Jobs did a wonderful thing in his product demo. His product demos are legendary, and most of them are available on YouTube. So he was launching the MacBook Air, the very, very thin laptop. Okay, and he could have easily told that my laptop is just 5 thick and all that, but he didn't do that. And as you rightly told, he showed and he didn't tell. And in order to show, what he did was that he just showed a manila envelope, a yellow manila envelope, okay, a very, very thin envelope. And just as a surprise, he pulled out the MacBook Air out of that manila envelope, which was almost flat. He did not have to say anything more to demonstrate the fact that the MacBook Air was so thin. And it was so surprising because the audience did not expect that you would pull out a computer out of a thin manila envelope. Okay, so that's an element of surprise. That is number one. Number two is that tension or contrast always helps in storytelling. Okay, so tension, I mean, we all watch movies, we all love movies. Okay, so and movies use that very well, be it Bollywood, be it Hollywood. Okay, for a change, I will give an example from Bollywood as opposed to business, but this applies very much in business as well. How they use tension. We know the legendary movie of Sholay. Okay, it's still talked about more than 50 years after it was released. So in the movie Sholay, there's a village, Ramgarh, where all the villagers lived very, very peacefully. It's a very calm village. It's a very nice village. And then suddenly, this Gabbar Singh came and broke all the calm and peace in the village, and that's how it caused all the tension. So, this tension and contrast, as opposed to the prevailing calm, which applies in any situation, even in data. So, we always try to show the tension between what was and what could be, and how different or stark the contrast is. Okay, so, tension and contrast is the second most important thing when you try to make your story stick. So, that is one. And the third is be specific, don't be abstract or general. Okay, people don't remember when you tell in generalities. Mother Teresa once very, very famously told that if I have to think of helping the poor and think of helping so many people, people are not going to take any action. But if I think of that one face, that one lady, that person who is in front of me, who I need to help, then people will take action because it's very, very specific. Okay, so again, the Coke example is a very good example. So the marketing, the leader in Coca-Cola could have easily told, we need to make a very differentiated Coca-Cola product. He did not do that. He very, very specifically told that we need to make a Coca-Cola bottle that is so distinct that when people touch it, even in the dark, when they cannot see the bottle, they can make out that it's a Coca-Cola bottle. And that's how the legendary contour bottle of Coca-Cola was invented, because he was so specific in his brief. Okay, so these are the three things: being specific, adding tension or contrast, and having an element of surprise.
So, three elements: surprise, there should be constant tension. Conflict is what makes stories very interesting. So, add a lot of conflict and tension. And finally, specificity, not generality, that'll work.
Absolutely.
Beautiful, sir. Now, do you have any frameworks or templates that you use for storytelling?
Absolutely. I think this is what makes storytelling a little easier in the business world, at least. And these templates are, especially the consultants like McKinsey and all, they're very well known, and many of them were actually they were made popular by McKinsey and other consulting firms. So one very, very common template, and this applies both in business as well as in the non-business world, is the situation, complication, and resolution. Okay, so it's a very, very simple framework: situation, complication, and resolution. Okay, the situation is nothing but it gives a background to the problem. It lays out the current environment. It lays out what is the context. Okay, then the complication is nothing but what is the problem? What is really bothering us? Okay, and the resolution, obviously, is the solution. What happened to the solution? And again, going back to the Sholay world, and the situation was that people in the village of Ramgarh, they were living very, very peacefully. There was a family of Thakur, the policeman, okay, and his family. Everybody was very, very peaceful. Okay, and then the complication was one fine day, Gabbar Singh and his army of bandits attacked the village. Okay, and they really caused ruckus. In fact, they killed the entire family of Thakur and they cut off his hands. So that was the complication. Okay, and this complication really drove the action, because unless there's a complication, you cannot drive yourself into action. So that was very important. So the action was that because of this particular incident in that village, the cop Thakur, he found two guys, Jay and Viru, okay, who were small time criminals, but they were very, very innovative and they were very, very bold. Okay, so he employed them in order to really solve the menace of Gabbar Singh, and he really took the help of Jay and Viru, and they really, as good friends, they formed a great plan to really rid the village, Ramgarh, of the menace of the bandits, and then that whole issue got resolved. So the situation, complication, resolution in the business world also, it's an extremely powerful framework, and that gives a very, very simple thing. And this particular framework has a lot of variants, but in essence, it's situation, complication, and resolution. So that is one framework. Another very useful framework that I have found, and something that McKinsey has propagated, is what is called as MECE, MECE. It expands into mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. Okay, so what that means is that it's a very, very analytical framework. When you try to solve a particular issue, try to find all the options. Okay, so try to find all the options so that they are mutually exhaustive, collectively exhaustive. They're exhaustive. You don't leave out any option. But at the same time, they should not be overlapping. Okay, so they should not be redundant, which means they have to be mutually exclusive. Okay, so let me give a simple example. So let's say a company wants to lay out a growth strategy. So growth strategy can be through two means. One is that it can grow the existing customer base, and second is it can find new customer bases. Okay, so it's two strategies. They are mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive. Then further, you can get one level down. In order to, let's say, tap into your existing customer base, maybe launch your products in a new channel, maybe launching your products in a new geography. Okay, maybe launch a new set of products which will find more consumers to adopt your products. Okay, so you kind of deep dive into each of them, but at each stage you use this mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive framework that will give you a very good way to really analytically approach the problem and solve the problem. So that is another framework. So situation, complication, resolution, and mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. And so many other frameworks, but these are two popular ones that I find very often useful.
Good. So you do use these in your business storytelling
Yeah.
scenarios. Excellent. Love it. I'm so glad that you brought up at the very basic level. If you think about the audience that are listening to our podcast right now, these are beginner speakers. They understand the importance of storytelling, but they just don't know how to do it. So this framework that you gave us, specifically the situation, complication, resolution, is a great one. It's in a way it is oversimplified, but I think that is the foundation that people need to have as beginners. If they understand that there is context, which is situation, then there is conflict, which is nothing but your complication, and you add the tension, and finally there is a conclusion or a resolution, what happened at the end of the story. Thank you for bringing that, sir. Also, Amitabh sir, you mentioned about the McKinsey's analytical approach, MECE, which is mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive, is an interesting one. Maybe it's for a little advanced people, but it's a great thing to know about. So, audience, if you're interested in knowing more about it, of course, you can reach out to Amitabh sir, or you can also use the power of ChatGPT now to dig into it to know further as well. So, thank you, Amitabh sir, for introducing those concepts. Let's go back to that Bollywood movie, Sholay, one of my favorites too. Now, when Thakur employs Jay and Viru, it doesn't happen easily, does it? There is a certain amount of persuasion that's required, whether it is to get somebody to do something, or more importantly, in a business situation where you have to persuade stakeholders and employees to do what you want them to do. How does business storytelling help you with persuasion?
You brought up a very, very important topic. Thanks a lot for that, Manjunath. See, at the end of the day, as leaders, I think it's extremely important that we are able to persuade, because at the end of the day, as leaders, we need to drive action. And the first step in being able to drive action is to persuade. Here again, a wonderful framework. And this framework is hundreds of years old, that comes to our rescue in trying to be persuasive. Okay, this is the Aristotle's framework of ethos, pathos, and logos. Okay, so let's get into what is ethos, pathos, and logos. So ethos is nothing but credibility. Okay, so if I am talking about business storytelling, why should I be a credible speaker? Why should people listen to me as a credible speaker in the area of business storytelling? Because I come from a business background, I'm a business leader. On the other hand, if I were to talk to you about medicine, I have no background in medicine. Nobody would be interested in listening to me about medicine. And I found this very often when in my LinkedIn post. By the way, many of the stories that we spoke about here, like the Coca-Cola story, are there on my LinkedIn feed. Okay, and I found this very, very effective in doing these LinkedIn posts which get traction. So what I found is that when I speak about the area that I am comfortable with and I'm an expert in, I find a lot of reaction, a lot of traction on my post. But sometimes I find some interesting things in the news that I would like to share. For example, the recent incident of Mamdani getting elected as the New York mayor. So that is a politics topic. That is not my forte. But I found that very interesting and I posted it. But I don't have a credibility in that area. So why would people acknowledge or react to that post? I found very little traction in that post. So the first is ethos. You need to have credibility on the topic that you're speaking. Okay? So where you come from is very, very important to have those persuasive ability. So that's the baseline. The next is pathos. Okay, so pathos and logos. So pathos is nothing but emotion that we spoke about. Okay, so in business, you need to appeal both to the right brain and to the left brain. So the pathos appeals to the emotion, whereas the logos appeals to the logic, data, facts, and figures, and both are required in equal measure. Missing out one for the other is not going to make you effective. If you just put all the emotions but not facts, business is built on facts, so you are not going to be credible. And if you put only data but with no emotion, you will perhaps the data is not going to stick and people are not going to be driven into action. And we saw that nicely in that Amazon example and the Airbnb example as well. The Airbnb example, for example, Airbnb wants to persuade its customers that they can make you feel at home. And just a marketing slogan wouldn't have cut it. An emotional story in terms of how the Japanese host made that customer or the Airbnb customer so much feel at home by doing all the things that made that particular customer appreciate the Japanese culture so much so that he at the end of the stay told that I feel like family, whereas I came like a stranger to start with. So that's an excellent example of the use of emotions. And of course, what differentiates business storytelling from the normal storytelling is that it has to be grounded in facts, it has to be grounded in data. You cannot just use your imagination and creativity and get away with it. Okay, so being using logos for that is extremely important. So in summary, your story has to stand on three stools in order to be persuasive. It has to stand on ethos, credibility. It has to stand on pathos, which is emotions, and it has to stand on logos, which is logic, facts, and figures. Then your story is going to be persuasive.
Excellent, excellent. Three big pillars. Credibility, ensure that people know who you are, then use stories to emotionally connect with them, use data, numbers, and statistics to even cement that point that you're trying to drive. Speaking of points to drive, one of my favorite speakers, persuasive, world renowned, is Steve Jobs. Again, you already brought up Steve Jobs. In that movie, in one of the movies, I don't recall the title, but in that movie, he dumps a Sony Walkman because it's too complicated. As a business leader, it's important for you and it's inevitable that you'll have to share some complex ideas with people. How can you use storytelling to turn those complex ideas to make them simple, like Steve Jobs used to do?
Absolutely. Steve Jobs is a master at it, and I think all of us can draw inspiration. Okay. And especially as folks in the technology area, this is all the more important because technology can be extremely complex and we need to simplify that complexity. So here are a few things that has helped me immensely in terms of turning complex ideas into something very, very simple. The first is to use analogies, okay, analogies, metaphors. Okay, so then people can relate to it. People may not be able to relate so much to artificial intelligence and all the algorithms that can go behind it. But if you put a nice analogy or a metaphor, people can easily understand. Let me give an example. For example, if I were to tell about artificial intelligence to my grandmother, because she sees the TV all the time and always very curious about what is happening. If I explain artificial intelligence, my mother or my grandmother, they will not be able to appreciate. But if I use the metaphor of electricity, okay, just like electricity, artificial intelligence, just like electricity, artificial intelligence is going to be everywhere and it is going to power everything that we do in the coming future, in the near future. Then she is going to be able to easily appreciate because she knows electricity powers everything. It powers the house, it powers the kitchen, it powers heating. Okay, so it's going to easily be able to relate. It's going to be very, very relatable, and these people who do not know artificial intelligence can also easily catch the idea. So analogies and metaphors, especially metaphors that all of us can already relate to, is very, very powerful and effective in terms of being able to simplify complex concepts, especially technological concepts. That is number one. Number two is that rather than giving lengthy explanations, stories come to the rescue. We've been talking about stories right from the beginning of this podcast. So, stories are extremely important in order to be able to make people appreciate things. Okay? So, wherever possible, try to use stories. Okay? For example, we have a product, revenue growth management product, and we use complex algorithms to solve pricing problems and all that. But at the end of the day, business is trying to solve the simple problem of inflation. Inflation is driving prices up. How can we give respite to the customers? So using stories, using simple stories is going to be more effective compared to detailed explanation. So that is number two. And number three is using visual models, visual frameworks, making it more visual. Okay, as opposed to a lot of text, as opposed to a lot of PPT, is far more effective. Okay, so again, let me give a simple example here. See, all the time we try to do a lot of projects, we come up with a lot of recommendations for our customers. Okay, and we have to explain each and every recommendation. It's going to be extremely difficult for the customer to make a decision. But what we use is a simple 2 by 2 matrix. On one axis of the matrix, we have priority, high priority, low priority. And another axis of the matrix, we say that it is easy to implement, it is difficult to implement. So it's very easy when you put all the projects in that particular 2 by 2 matrix, that something which has high impact and easy to implement, those are low hanging fruits. Okay, so those can be easily taken up and those can be prioritized. And it's extremely simple for us to persuade the customers that this is going to have a lot of business impact for you and it's not so hard to implement. So go for it. Whereas on the other hand, which are hard to implement but have very low business impact, obviously those are nice to have, or you may even ignore them. Okay, so this helps in priority. So if you put it in a very visual form, people are able to easily connect to it as opposed to detailed explanation, detailed text, and all that. Okay, so these are some simple ways in which we can make complex things simple. So to just summarize, one is using analogies and metaphors, using stories instead of detailed explanations, and using visual graphs and visual techniques. So these are
Beautiful.
some of the
Thank
ways.
you. So I love how you have structured every answer. I've noticed that there is a pattern to it. First, you introduce the concept, you give an example, and then you do a recap. So that's a learning for me from that itself. That's beautifully presented. Thank you, sir. Speaking of this metaphors and similes, I remember when Steve Jobs again introduced the iPod, instead of saying it was 512 GB or whatever, he said, imagine 10,000 songs in your pocket.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor right there, right? Instead of people
Absolutely.
explaining something technical,
Mm,
you use metaphor in a way that we mortal beings can understand that's beautiful, and that's the power of using metaphors.
right.
So thank you for sharing that. So now you've spoken about business storytelling, persuasive, being persuasive, turning complex ideas into simple ones through analogies and stories and visual models and frameworks. All these are beautiful. There are different types of stories. Now, when I tell my wife about what happened at work, that's like a personal story. And when I'm talking to my students about digital marketing and I give them an example with a case study, just like you did with Airbnb, which is a case study, that's a business storytelling. So, is there any difference? Is there any difference really between personal storytelling, business storytelling, data storytelling? There's just so many terms that people use.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Great. Very
So, what are your thoughts
fascinating.
on that?
Yeah, sure. First, let's start with what is really similar in both of them. Okay, so storytelling at the end of the day, I think, is the best way to communicate, okay, whether it's data storytelling, business storytelling, or creative storytelling. I think no better way than to communicate. As human beings, we are wired to listen to stories in a more engaging way. Okay, so that's the common theme that runs across. Having said that, there are very, very important differences between normal storytelling that we see in movies or even in the stories that we read in the books, fiction versus business storytelling. So the first is the objective. The objective of the storytelling when we walk into a movie theater is to entertain us, to and really delight us, to humor us. Okay, so that's the objective. We want to get away from the day-to-day boredom and we want to entertain ourselves. We want to really inspire ourselves. Okay, so that's the objective of usual storytelling. Whereas in a business storytelling, typically the objective is to solve a particular problem. At the end of the day, the whole world of business is trying to solve a problem and hopefully make some money out of it. Okay, so hopefully turn that into a monetizable thing. So in business storytelling, the objective is to really solve a problem, okay, by trying to get the insights and drive persuasive abilities to drive people to take action and solve the problem. Okay, so that's the whole objective. Then the second is that the tools that we use in normal storytelling as opposed to business storytelling, therefore, are a little different. Okay, in normal storytelling, like you tell a story in a Toastmasters speech or in a movie, so the plot plays a very important role. The literary devices that plays a very important role. The emotional tools play important role. For example, we use the hero's journey, okay, or we use a three-act structure, the conflict, the climax, the resolution. Okay, so that those are the plot structures that typically get used. Okay, then the other tool is the literary devices. We use a lot of dialogues, we use a lot of metaphors, we use a lot of allegories, a lot of literary devices. I mean, Shakespeare and others are masters at it. Okay, so the literary giants. Okay, then we use a lot of emotion, a lot of emotional tools are also available at our command, be it tragedy, be it romance, be it humor. Okay, so these are very, very effectively used in normal storytelling, the tools. But the tools in business storytelling, not to say that all these are not used. For example, like we saw, emotion is certainly important, but the emphasis is a little different. The emphasis in business storytelling is more on using analytical frameworks. Whereas creativity plays a very, very important role in normal storytelling, analytical frameworks play a very, very important role in business storytelling because analytical frameworks are extremely effective in solving problems. If, for example, we saw the structured frameworks like the situation, complication, resolution, or McKinsey's the MISI framework, mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. Then there's another pyramid principle of McKinsey to communicate concepts more very, very effectively. Okay, then you have this ethos, pathos, logos, that is another framework. So analytical frameworks are the tools that normally get used in business storytelling. So in summary, to kind of recap the whole thing, the normal storytelling's purpose is to really entertain or inspire the audience, whereas in business storytelling, it is to really solve a particular problem, because that's the key thing. And therefore, the kind of tools that get used in normal storytelling are things like plots, things like literary devices, emotional tools like humor, whereas the tools that typically get used in business storytelling are analytical frameworks like the situation, complication, resolution, the MISI framework, the ethos, pathos, logos framework. So these are some of the key differences.
Beautiful, beautiful again. So a couple of weeks ago, I did a little webinar, and the whole idea of webinar is to get beginner speakers to be clear about the objective. And I'm so glad that you brought this. The objective can make all the difference. So I told them at the end of the speech, how do you want your audience to think, feel, or do? If your goal is humor and entertainment, be clear about that so that your entire speech is designed to achieve that, to accomplish that humor and entertain. On the other hand, if you're talking about something more serious, where people need to take some action to enhance their lives, then your objective should be educational, informative, or persuasive, even, and that can make all the difference. So many people think that speech is all about opening body and conclusion. In my books, I think the very first thing is the objective. You've got to be very, very clear what you want to accomplish at the end of that speech, of your speech. How do you want your audience to change their thinking, change their feeling about the topic, or what you want them to do as a result of speaking? So beautiful, sir. Thank you. That was beautifully presented. So personal storytelling or normal storytelling like movies is all about entertainment. Business storytelling is about solving a problem. And that is important. Now, speaking of business storytelling, Amitabh sir, there's a lot of data involved, and data can get boring. How do you use the power of storytelling to make the data more interesting?
Very good one again. At the end of the day, uh, in business, we need to solve problems, we need to drive actions. And if anything is boring, you can be sure that it's not going to drive actions. You can have all the data in the world, but if it is boring, no action is going to be taken. So here are a few things which I have found very effective in my own personal life and business life in order to make present data in a very compelling way that drives action. Okay. First is nobody cares about the data. What they care about is the insight that the data provides, and hence what is the action that needs to be taken. So highlight what is the insight. Of course, you need to show the data. The underlying data has to be there. But unless it shows what is the insight, people are not going to take action. So show the insights, not just the data. Number two is again, as you told earlier in the podcast, show, don't tell. Data can be reams of data, but unless you show it in a visual and a graphical format, like we saw in the 2 by 2 matrix, it's going to be very difficult for people to digest the data. So it's very important to put the data in a very, very easily digestible visualization formats so that you are able to show as opposed to just keep telling a lot of things about data. Okay, so that is number two. Number three is add contrast, add conflict. Okay, data is not useful unless we are able to see what stands out. What was the situation before and what is the situation after? Okay, what was it before the problem was there and what was it after the problem was resolved? So let's put all this together and look at one of the all-time best data stories which ever got told. So this is a true story which here happened many, many years back in the year 1954 in London. In London, in 1954, there was an outbreak of cholera that was killing hundreds and hundreds of people. So this person, John Snow, was extremely good at data. Okay, so people were under the impression that it was bad air that was spreading all across the environment and killing people. But John Snow had a hunch because he found that around a particular pump that was there, a water pump, a water supply, which a lot of people lost their lives around that. So he had a hunch maybe it could be the water from that water supply pump. So he tried to analyze the data. He tried to analyze all the deaths. He mapped those deaths out in a map of London and he overlaid that on the water supply. And then he found very, very interesting. His hypothesis came to life. What he found was that wherever that water supply was there, wherever people were drinking water from that particular water supply, the deaths were clustered around that. Whereas people who are drinking, for example, some people had their own wells. They were not drinking water from that particular water supply, although they were living close to that water supply. And in that family, there were no deaths. Another very interesting thing he found that very close to that particular place, there was a brewery. The workers in the brewery, they were all the time drinking beer as opposed to drinking water. They did not suffer deaths. They did not suffer cholera. Okay, so it was starkly clear that the water from the water supply was really carrying the infection of the cholera and people were dying. And he put that in a very nice map. He put the deaths that were happening in a map as dots. Each dot represented a death and it was showing in which geographical area in London that death was happening. And he overlaid that whole water supply and showed that this particular water supply, everybody around this particular water supply who were there, that's where the deaths were happening. And he conclusively proved without that data visualization, people would not have believed him. And that really prevented so many deaths. So that was the wonderful insight that he showed out of data. And that made so much impact. It saved so many lives. It is even today one of the best data stories ever told.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So Jon Snow is my new hero now. I want to study more about him. Never heard that story. Thank you for bringing that to light. So that's beautiful, right? So number one, insights. Number two, present in a visual, graphical format. That matters a lot. Number three, there should be contrast so that people know the before and after, try and understand what's going on. Beautiful. Any other points you'd want to add to this? How to make data more interesting through storytelling?
Yeah, so see, at the end of the day, see, we need to, there's a lot of data everywhere nowadays, there's no dearth of data. So, what I've found senior leaders really very, very effective. They don't have the time. Okay, so they always get to the question, so what? You're showing me all this data. So, they ask that piercing question, so what?
So,
Okay, so that is what forces you to look at what is the insight out of the data. Okay, so that is one useful question to ask always. Okay, you have a slide, you're showing data. Ask that so what question. Okay, so then it will help you to tweak that whole data in a way that it is resulting in action, it is resulting in insight. Okay, so that's one example. Okay, then again, I think using a lot of tools are there to be able to show the data in a very, very effective way. Okay, using all the tools, I think are extremely useful nowadays. A lot of very nice visualization tools and all that there. Okay, nowadays all the newspapers, leading journals and all, they have a data story. I see, for example, I read the Hindu newspaper. So almost every day they have a data story. Okay, if elections are going on in Bihar, they put it in a nice data chart and show that story. So what I would have otherwise taken maybe half an hour to read, just by looking at that chart, the insight is extremely clear in a matter of seconds. Okay, so these are some sources that we can look at to inspire ourselves to use data effectively.
So I've done just a few podcasts. I'm a beginner to podcasts, sir. And my first ever podcast was with your good friend DTM Prabhakara, sir. Later, one of the very popular DTMs in Bangalore, DTM Matthew, and now you. One of the things that I see common that came across speaking to all three of you is the importance of reading. You brought in the newspaper, and I notice always you're on LinkedIn giving stories from books and so on and so forth. I'm just curious, as a storyteller, how important do you think it is for us to read? The importance of reading.
Yeah. See, none of us are born storytellers because all of us learn, and just like everything that we learn, storytelling is also something that all of us can learn. So it just requires a little bit of an appreciation and interest, and then we need to read. And I mean, nowadays there's no dearth of really content. Okay, so content is all over the place. So reading, I think, has played an important role. Reading nowadays, a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of Insta posts, a lot of great magazines, a lot of great journals. Steve Jobs, I think he's an all-time inspiration for all of us. I think he's typically his product launches are, I think, master classes in how you can use storytelling to dramatic effect and really persuade people to take action. No wonder millions of people buy their products. Okay, then reading a lot of good journals, a lot of good newspapers. All the time, the good journalists are presenting data in a way that really makes a ton of news digestible in a very, very easy format. Okay, then legendary brands like Coca-Cola, I think they are the masters of visual, art of visual storytelling. So they tell stories. I mean, it's not a coincidence that brands like Coca-Cola, brands like Nike, brands like Apple, okay, so they are the best brands in the world, and they are the best brands in the world because they are so good at storytelling, and we all believe into their stories. And it really goes to show how much emotions are important. While in business, data and facts are important, but these brands have really shown the art of that ethos, pathos, and logos, combining all these three elements in good measure to really make storytelling very compelling and make us fans of those particular brands and companies. So inspiration is all around us, be it reading, be it listening, be it listening to good podcasts like yours, be it TED Talks. Okay, so all these have certainly inspired me and made my job much more interesting and made my job much more effective in terms of being able to translate technology into compelling business stories that drive actions.
Amazing. Do you recommend some books or role models that I should follow? People like me who are beginners who want to become bold speakers should follow and read. Do you have any recommendations to improve our storytelling skills?
Yeah. Top of the mind, of course, is Steve Jobs, but a few specific videos that I found very, very compelling. For example, the iPhone product launch that he did, okay, in which he showed the contrast. We talked about tension and contrast. He showed how clunky the keys of the smartphones were, the Nokia smartphones, the BlackBerry smartphones, as opposed to huge screen phone. At that point in time, it was a very big screen. Okay, so his product launches, I mean, the iPhone product launch and even the MacBook Air that was talking about how he pulled out a thin laptop out of the manila envelope. So his product launches are a master class in business storytelling. So that's a great inspiration all the time. And then there are authors like Nancy Duarte, especially if you're doing a lot of presentations in your work. Okay, she has written a lot of good books. One of them is Resonate, quite a few other books that she has written. So if you're into a lot of PowerPoint presentations and all, her books are extremely useful. And she's done a couple of TED Talks as well. Then business storytelling is a lot about influence as well, about a lot about persuasion as well. Okay, so understanding human nature is extremely important. Cialdini has written a wonderful book called Influence, Robert Cialdini. So that's the key levers of influence. That's a very, very compelling book that really helps us understand human behavior and how we need to incorporate human behavior so that we tell stories so that our fellow human beings are persuaded. Okay, so these are some of the stories, resources that I found extremely useful. And of course, now with Chat GPT, things have become extremely easy. All you need to do is just ask the prompts, and it's going to give a ton of resources in addition to this.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, Steve Jobs' iPhone, I'm so glad that you brought that up because I remember that every step of the way. Like he talks about how the BlackBerry had those plastic buttons, it takes up majority of the screen. Why should it take so much of screen? And if there is a change, the whole thing needs to be redesigned, manufactured, and brought a new one bought. But yeah, the contrast and the tension that he brings about looking at two different products and then presenting iPhone as a superior, more valuable product is beautifully presented there. Thank you. Also, Nancy Duarte, you mentioned. Resonate is the name of the book. I love Influence. By the way, I have that book too. Robert Cialdini, excellent copywriter. So when I started my marketing journey as a digital marketer, I read that book to improve my copywriting skills on the websites and emails. So thank you, sir. Beautiful resources. But like all things in life, not everything is beautiful. Storytelling has its own pitfalls as well. Oh, when telling your stories, what are some of the things that one should avoid? And also, how can we get the audience to be glued when you're speaking? How do you do that with stories?
Yeah. Yeah, we see that all the time. The moment you see that somebody has started glancing the phone, you know that there's something that's not so right with the story because we could not hold the attention of the audience. So a couple of them come to my mind. So one is not having a logical flow. If you're not having a logical flow, if the transitions don't make sense, then people are easily going to get lost in your story. Okay, people are not going to be, they may start with you, but very soon they will get lost and they will start glancing their phone. So, not having a proper logical flow is one of the common pitfalls. And the easiest way to address that is using those frameworks that we talked about, especially the situation, complication, resolution framework that really brings that flow very nicely into any
Beautiful.
story. So, that is number one. Number two is not gauging the audience. You have to speak to the audience and you really need to understand what the audience is expecting. For example, when you present to senior executives, you present to CXOs, they are always short of time. So they are not having the patience to listen to long explanations. Okay, and the moment you get into a long explanation, they are going to walk out of the room. So there you need to use what is known as a bottom line upfront, bluff, they call it, bottom line upfront. Give the insight upfront. Don't give a lot of explanation and then give the insight after half an hour or 1 hour. Okay, give the insight right away. And then, I mean, they are interested in what really will solve their problem in life, in business. Okay, so you need to be really succinct, really crisp with them and use their time extremely effectively. So knowing the audience, okay, so like a senior audience, their time is precious. So you need to tailor your stories as opposed to getting into your full explanation. Number three is too much data without insights. Okay, we saw that example before because we have a lot of data. Data is all good, but ask that question, so what? Okay, the moment you pierce your PPT slide or your data with that so what question, you're going to come to that insight. Okay, so presenting reams of data is not going to help. Bringing out that insight is what really counts. Okay, at the end of the day, people want that insight, and so that's very important. Of course, there's so many other things. Interesting quote comes to my mind because you can be wrong in so many ways. So Leo Tolstoy, in one of his very famous novels, Anna Karenina, his opening line was that happy families are all happy families in a similar way. Okay, whereas unhappy families, they're unhappy for so many different reasons. Okay, similarly, people get stories wrong for many, many different reasons. Okay, so there are countless other reasons, but yeah, these are some of the top few.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So, number one, there should be a logical flow. Number two, you should gauge the audience. Number three, too much data without insights is not going to work. So, getting to the root cause, so what? Asking a question like that can get into the bottom of the things. And also, bluff to the senior leadership. That's an interesting one. Bluff. That
Yeah,
bottom
bottom line
line
upfront
upfront,
bluff. Yeah.
just, yeah, get to the point. Excellent. Amitabh said it's been an absolute value packed episode, this one. I truly appreciate your time. Thank you for being here with us, with our audience, sharing the wisdom and being very prepared through your answers. You had a very clear structure and it helps our audience understand and become better speakers and better storytellers, more importantly. So I appreciate your time again. If people were to reach out to you for mentoring, to be coached by you, what is the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, the best way would be to LinkedIn. You can easily find me on LinkedIn. Amitabh Saha Roy, if you search, you can easily find me on LinkedIn. And a lot of the stories that we spoke about today, they're all on LinkedIn posts. So happy to have anyone reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm happy to share what I know about business storytelling.
And you do offer mentoring if people are
Yes,
serious. Yeah.
absolutely.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Any last words you want to share with our viewers and listeners?
All I want to say is that I think this is a very, very enjoyable journey. I know that business is hard, work is hard, but bringing that storytelling angle brings a lot of pleasure into what we do. So, not only is it a very, very effective communication tool, but it's also a joy once we discover the power of storytelling, because all the time we are trying to hone and sharpen our skills in storytelling, and that whole journey itself becomes a pleasure. And business storytelling is one such journey. So, I hope that all your audience deep dive into business storytelling, and happy to discuss with anybody who is interested further in this particular topic.
Thank you, sir. So, viewers and listeners, go ahead, tell your personal stories, tell your business stories, impact lives. Make sure every story of yours is remembered for a very, very long time. Thanks again, Amitabh Saha Roy, sir, for taking the time, DTM, for taking the time and being here with us. We loved it. And I'm sure our audience will want you to come back with another topic the next time. Maybe we'll talk about AI. That's so much talk happening in that world. So thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Manjunath. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, folks, please go ahead, subscribe to the channel, Rise and Speak podcast for beginners who want to become bold speakers. We bring in amazing guests like DTM Amitabh Saha Roy today and many more to come. So, please stay tuned. Also, if you have any guest in mind that you want on this show so that we can ask questions and learn from their life, please let me know. Leave it in the comments down below. Give it a like. Give it a like. Subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. This is Rise and Speak podcast on behalf of DTM Amitabh Saha Roy, sir, and CM Manjunath signing off. Have a good one. Bye bye.